Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. I am Dean, and once again, I have Devin with me.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully, everyone had a good weekend and is warm.
Yeah, I would say we are probably in the warmest area of the country, and it's not that warm out right now for our standards, at least.
Our standards. I think if we would tell people what our temperatures are, people still would say that's cold.
Yeah, we finally turned on the heat in our house for the first time in a year.
I mean, it snowed in Florida, so
Yeah, not where we're at, but in northern Florida. Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, that is nuts. But we're not here to talk about this weird Arctic weather. We are here to talk about the Pokemon trading card game and how the rogue decks, how rogue decks meet with the meta decks and all that fun stuff. So, Devin, have you had any fun times with Pokemon lately?
I mean, I just got a shiny Deoxys before we recorded.
Yeah, you were telling me about that.
I got the Deoxys and Go. I didn't do it in Violet Red or Leaf Green. I didn't do it the hard way, but I was doing a remote raid, getting ready set up, and last week before we start the call, I go, I just got a shiny Deoxys.
Yeah, I heard your wife in the background. It's like I heard a response. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh yeah, she hates it whenever I get a shiny, even though she's gotten two of these before I got mine. So yeah.
But with me, I've been having a fun week with building different homebrew decks. Um, I know we made some claims on our episode last week about the lack of creativity, and I kind of took it upon myself that if we're going to make these statements, if we're going to say we want to see more uniqueness at the local level, we cannot be part of the problem. If we say like, oh yeah, I want to see something different, and then I go bring Regidrago to a tournament, it's not really helping our case at all. So in the last week, I've been experimenting with a lot of fun rogue decks. I know a lot of people in my local league has been doing the same as well. We actually started a new channel in our Discord for all these interesting ideas, and I just love seeing how we all responded to this. And I was actually bold enough to say that with the challenge that I will be participating the day of this podcast will release, I'm not going to play anything that has been on the graphic at any regional this season.
So you're just gonna have to react to see how the meta goes, huh?
Luckily, it hasn't really changed all season, but I wanted to make sure I was going to keep to my word, because a lot of people are like, "Oh, you can just play Ancient Box that hasn't been on the graphic for a while," but Ancient Box has done well. If you look at the online tournaments, has done well as well. So I didn't want to like go the cheap route, and then I'm like, well, I can build an Arceus deck. Well, I feel like that's a cop out too, because Arceus is always good. That the Starbirth ability is pretty broken. I want to go in a different direction, so we'll talk about one of my creations in this week's Road Deck of the Week. But I've been having fun with just playing some other archetypes as well, and I'm excited to see what I finally end up bringing to the challenge on Thursday. So we'll see. Um, I know my friends has kind of give their opinions of what I should bring, so I'm taking that into consideration. But it's been a very fun week making rogue decks and actually do it from scratch and not finding something online and just playing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on some stuff in the back, um, but I don't know the card pool nearly as well as you, so it takes me a little longer to kind of figure out some stuff.
Yeah, I
But I
know.
get it.
Yeah, I know you and me were talking about this new series we're gonna do with the Road Deck of the Week showcase. So we'll introduce that next week as a little teaser for our listeners. But outside of us doing our Pokemon things, there were some major tournaments that happened this weekend.
Oh yeah.
So this past weekend we had two regionals, actually legit regionals. One over in England in Birmingham, and then one down in South America in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah. And honestly, they both have two very different approaches to the meta shares, and that's actually we've talked about that in the past when there's been regionals in two different parts of the world. How a lot of the top tables and all that, it's just very different, and it's always good to kind of see that yes, there is a somewhat diverse meta game. I'm not saying it's completely diverse, but definitely different representation in each of the top eights at each tournament.
I will say the meta did shake up a little bit. There was a newcomer to the party this time around for both tournaments. One greater in Birmingham than Rio de Janeiro.
Mm-hmm.
But our Chaladon made its debut. It was on the graphic, and then actually had the best conversion rate into day two.
And you were actually talking about Artazon like for the last week or so, like away from the podcast, obviously. Like you were seriously looking at this card for the longest time, and you just weren't 100% committed to it yet.
Yeah, I just haven't had the time to practice with it. I just love my cloth deck, and I'm just comfortable with it. I haven't had the reps in Archaludon as I have with cloth. For that cup, I was actually considering playing Archaludon, and also to the challenge, and I just changed last second. But yeah, 37 made day two out of how many people were there in Birmingham?
2018.
So 37 made day two, and how many made day two? So out of 2018, 360 people made day two. So 10% of the player base that made day two was playing Archaludon, which is a relatively new deck in our format in the Western side. We saw the success of it in Japan, and honestly, if you look at Japanese results still, it's kicking butt. But no one knew the transition it would make to our side of the world, especially with the attack only being 220.
Yeah, so it was the fourth most common deck played in the entire tournament. And then in day two, it was the second most common deck in day two.
Yeah. So, good introduction for this. People are now actually taking this serious. So, with that, we still see Regidrago as the number one deck, I believe, for both tournaments. Yeah, Regidrago was still number one, and then Charizard was also in the top three in both. So, same old stuff. I'm going through the tournaments. I'm trying to see if there's anything interesting that we want to speak of.
Unfortunately, in terms of like both tournaments, the only thing I kind of saw was the Archaludon kind of peeking its head, and then Quad Thorns making a pretty significant impact in Rio. I thought that was interesting because I didn't really think that Quad Thorns really had a significant part of the meta share, even just like in the top tables, but it made a very good showing in Rio de Janeiro with second and sixth respectively.
Yeah,
But
that's another deck that no one really respects, especially with what happened at Worlds. But it is a tough. It's a good deck to play. It's a great meta call, and if you're in the opponent's shoes, it is tough. Like I ran into one in Toronto, and historically I should have done way better than what I did with it, and it stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah, when I saw the results, I'm like, oh, Quadthorn. So I don't know if Quadthorn's going to make a comeback by any means, but I'm like, oh, it's there. made the finals, so good for them. But I think it goes back to, I hate to say it, but it goes back to what we talked about last week, right? Where the creativity at the top tables really isn't there for the most part. And even when there's newcomers to the conversation, they're not unexpected newcomers. Like, Archaludon was a card everyone goes, all right, this will eventually be a good deck. It's just a matter of time when someone figures it out. And there was two different philosophies with that deck that made an impact in day 2 over in Birmingham, where it was pure Archaludon list, and then there's Archaludon Dialga. So both made impact in the tournament. And then you have Quadthorns over in Rio de Janeiro, where it's like, all right, Quadthorns have always kind of peeked his head randomly here and there, but you wouldn't really call Quadthorns a out of left field type of deck.
No, it's always been around. It's just no one likes to play it or play against it. But one thing I'm looking at the results for Birmingham, there's a lot of Palkia Terapagos that made top cut. 3 out of the top 8 is Palkia Terapagos, and that's a deck we don't really see a lot.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, the deck itself is super synergistic within itself. Like, sometimes you have just, like, an attack here or there that makes sense, but, like, this deck is, you have the Terra engine with Terapagos, Noctowl, Fanrodom, and then you just do a splash of Palkia, but I think Palkia has turned into the most versatile card in the format.
Yeah, you see it in a lot of decks. You see it paired with Terapagos in this instance. It's paired with Stellar Edge. We see that make day 2 a couple times. But yeah, it's a very versatile deck. It's been around forever. But interesting too, because like in Rio, the deck that won it all was the Palkia Dusknoir as well. So Fabrizio Silva, who is a great Latin American player, probably one of the best, if not the best LATAM player right now. And he takes down the whole entire tournament against Quadthorns, ironically enough. And Quadthorns hits it for weakness. So the fact that he was able to circumvent that just says how strong that deck is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a resilient deck. I think the deck itself is designed and built in such a way to where having 2 different attackers with 2 different weaknesses and 2 different kind of same type of damage modifier, you're just kind of being like, all right, I have a 2/2 line of Palkia and I have 2 Terapagos. See what's happening, you flipped over. Okay, I'm going with this one this match.
Yeah.
So you're giving yourself the ultimate flexibility when it comes to that.
So fun fact. So Fabrizio Silva in Latin America, first place for the Rio de Janeiro. And then Alexander Rutovis, sorry I'm saying your name wrong, the top 4 Palkia Terapagos player, they played the same 60. And no one has, and this is a 60 that no one has seen, and I'm not even sure if we have seen it before. Yeah. So these 2 players in these 2 different parts of the world bring the same 60 to 2 different regionals and top it. I think that's interesting.
I mean, it's kind of goes back to players will test, and I'm sure they probably have very similar friend groups, but also at the end of the day, optimized lists will get shared and spread, and there's no point of just changing a list if it's already optimized.
Yeah, that's true.
So could it be a coincidence they came to the same 60? Absolutely, it could be, but when groupthink and the hive mind kind of get together and the best the best 60 kind of gets created, why reinvent the wheel? Just test with it and see if it fits your playstyle. Absolutely. I'm not criticizing either one of them. It's great that they have the same 60. It's great that the same 60 did well at two completely different tournaments with two completely different meta layouts. It just shows how good that deck is right now.
So, I think that's something that people are going to respect more. It was always one of those decks that no one was going to really. I'm not saying people weren't taking it serious, but when you pick a deck for any tournament, that wasn't on the list of something you should watch out for. But with this, I think this is something that players are going to think about when making deck selections for this weekend with San Antonio coming up. So that's interesting to see that. One cool thing, I'm looking at the decks that made day 2 for Birmingham right now. United Wings made day 2. That is...
Night March always makes an appearance somewhere. That's all I can ever say.
It's interesting because it's one of those decks that no one really cares about. No one talks about it. Granted, I wouldn't say it did super well. Like, it made day 2, that's doing great. But it was in the top 256. It got 229th. And looking at it, it's definitely just... It's United Wings.
I mean, sometimes a strong single prizer will do what it needs to do, and that's all you can ask it to do.
Yeah.
And you will high roll and just go as far as the deck will let you.
So, if you're looking for a cheap deck that does well for any tournaments coming up, this deck is not even $20 to create.
Yeah, it's $16 US. Almost just barely under 17.
Yeah, and it's mostly like the traditional staples that you have. The Pokemon are going to be the weird thing because there are a couple Pokemon from Shrouded Fables, like the Dartrix and the Rowlet that you'll need, but everything else you may be able to have in your bulk. So if you're looking for a fun deck to play and that's going to catch people off guard, United Wings may be it. I'm sure no one outside of us is going to take any time talking about this. So,
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's all really you can really say. It's like, okay, it's there.
Yeah.
It did well.
So I'm just trying to find something else interesting, out of the ordinary. There was an Arceus deck that made day 2. It's Arceus with special energies, so you don't have it with Armaroos or anything like that. It looks like play Arceus V-Star and just try to add damage with the Dusknoir and clean up with Ursaluna. So kind of straightforward in that regards. I'm trying to see if there's anything else interesting. Not really. Gouging Fire. I wonder if the same person was at... No, he didn't make it. So there's this one European player that is known to play Gouging Fire. I didn't see him play this, or at least make day 2 with it. I don't know if he played it at Birmingham or not. But, let's see. Let's look at Rio, see if there's anything interesting here.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through Rio real quick.
Oh, this is a deck we haven't seen in a while. Shout out to my friend, to Solomon, who we had on this podcast. Future Box made day 2 again.
Okay.
It came back. And it looks fairly similar. It plays Iron Crowns, Iron Leaves, Iron Thorns, Iron Valiant. I think Iron Valiant's a little new. But it has Decrispin, help with the energy acceleration. Lacy. What does Lacy do? Shuffle your hand into your deck. Then draw 4 cards if your opponent has 3 or fewer cards. Oh, okay. Nice energy draw acceleration there. But yeah, it got 183rd. So good job to this player with this list as well. You see anything else worth mentioning?
Not really. I mean, like, it's like we said, there's a lot of diversity, but diversity to a point. After a certain point, it just becomes all right. You're just seeing the same things over and over again. But it's just, I mean, you go to a tournament like this, you want to do well. You play the best deck, or you play the deck you're most comfortable with. You're not showing up to a regional just to have fun. At least not with the way the regionals are being done nowadays, right? I was telling you, if I'm gonna drop $70, I'm just not gonna. I'm gonna try to win. You know,
Yeah.
the cost of entry nowadays is just so high. It's you don't blame players for taking it more serious than years past.
And there's just too much on the line. It's not just like, oh, yes, there is a good cost to enter, but there's also a great reward if you do well. And as much as we like road decks, we understand that they may not be the best play when you come to a tournament like this, because you want to make sure you do the best you can, and road decks can be inconsistent compared to Regidrago, Charizard, Lugia, all the upper meta decks that we typically see.
Mm-hmm.
So with all that, as we mentioned before, this upcoming weekend in San Antonio, Texas, there's another regional, the first North American regional of 2025. So from this, do you think people will adapt their decks or do something interesting in response to what we saw this past weekend?
I think if your deck already doesn't have a natural counter to Quad Thorns, I think that's going to be something that people will take into consideration. And then I think maybe if your deck can afford it, maybe we'll see a little increase in Collapse Stadium. Not only because of the Area Zero counter, but I think even just countering Area Zero, but then even shrinking them even more for that Terrapagos, Palkia, and even just any Palkia that we've been seeing lately, right? Palkia has kind of been seeing just an uptick in usage. And like we talked about it being so splashable, maybe seeing more collapsed stadiums just to make sure that Palkia stays a little bit more under control.
Yeah, and not just for Palkia. I think for almost a lot of the decks are very support heavy, where your bench is a lot of your bench is just support Pokemon. So if you can limit either how much support Pokemon your opponent has, or even just kind of get out of a backup attacker, it will put your opponent on the step behind. So I can see that too, because I know Charizard, some of the lists play the Collapse Stadium because it doesn't need a lot. As soon as it gets two Charizards set up, it just needs that, maybe a Rotom or Lumineon for the V-Star, and then something else. It's
Mm-hmm.
fine. It doesn't need a lot, but some of these decks need a lot more, like Regidrago. Sometimes you need the backup Regidrago on there. You need one or two Teal Dance to get your energies going. You need Pheasantipity. Sometimes you want either have that Cleffa or Mew for your pivot option. So even if you can limit that space by one, it kind of hinders your strategy even just a little bit or just enough to where it may make them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, so you think Iron Thorns is going to make a comeback?
I think it's going to see a little more play. I think we have a couple different archetypes, not just Quad Thorns, but like there's so many deck archetypes that could utilize the electric stall or electric disruption that the card itself will make appearance, maybe not as a Quad Thorn, but it's going to make more appearances. I think it's an easy splash because of how versatile electric is in the meta right now.
Yeah, we're not really seeing Miraidon be as popular, but with it being the last tournament in this format before we introduce prismatic evolutions, Miraidon's always a safe pick. So I feel like a lot of people may do that going forward. I'm not sure how it changes with Bidoof once that becomes legal for tournament play. So people may just take advantage of playing decks that are very item reliant until they really can't.
Yeah, I think with the next, so after San Antonio, the next tournaments, there's a regional in Madeira and then a special event in Puerto Rico, and that's getting us into the middle of February. So it's going to, a lot of players are going to have a lot of time to experiment and test with the Prismatic Evolution set. And I think San Antonio is going to get that lame duck kind of feel, where there's a lot of players already looking to the new format, and they're just, some people may play around and may have a little more fun, and some players may not even want to go because why? This meta season in terms of this quarter has lasted a very long time.
Yeah, I know there's a couple top players that are not doing San Antonio. Azul GG, for those who are know who he is, he's made it clear that he's not going to be at San Antonio. He did register, and he was like, "This is a very stale format. If I go, I would have been playing Regidrago because there's no other deck that's as good as Regidrago." And I just didn't think, and he was like, I didn't think that was fun. So he's staying back. He's going to stream San Antonio. He's going to give his commentary over it, and he's going to play Prismatic Evolutions and just try out new decks because he is going to that Mexico regional in Merida because that's just right on the border of the United States. So there's a lot of Americans going to that. And yeah, we'll see how many people go. I think as of now, this may be the biggest regional ever, but that doesn't mean a lot of the top players are going.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. That's just time of year, people in terms of travel and different things like that. Like, there's going to be some decisions and players are just going to make just because it's just easier for them.
Yeah, and especially with this weather that we're having, even in Texas, they're getting that snow too, and so we'll see how many people actually do show up. I'm excited to see what this tournament brings. I always enjoy watching these tournaments when I can. And I know you and me were talking about earlier. We're just hoping for maybe like a last hoorah with different archetypes. See if they can make it a little interesting before we get these new cards from Prismatic Evolutions, and I'm hoping to see that a lot more. I will say, when I first woke up last Saturday morning and watched Birmingham, there were some interesting decks on stream. I'm trying to remember it was round 3. It was the first one. It was something actually. Oh, it was Palafin. Palafin EX was on stream. So that was nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a couple people that will bring a good deck or bring it off the wall deck and do well with it. And I think when the events are streamed, the stream organizers does a good job of trying to do some diversity in the early parts of the tournament. But then when it comes to when it ends and different things like that, they just have to go with the information's in front of them.
Yeah, so we'll see what pops up this weekend, if anything. As of now, this is the biggest regional in the Western, in the TPCI playing zones. We'll see if this inspires a lot of people. We'll see if we can see that on stream. But with that, before we go into a rogue deck of the week, kind of throwing Devin a little curveball here. But we had a little teaser of the new Switch 2. Were you
Yeah.
so? What are your thoughts on that? I know it's not necessarily about Pokemon trading card game, but the new console does play into Pokemon, and without the video game, we wouldn't have the trading card game. So yeah, what are your thoughts on the new console? About the what they've shown us? Just, yeah.
So the good part is the Switch 2 is not very much different than the Switch. Um, they're still making it handheld to dock, so they're not committing to one or the other, which gives Nintendo uh, a very big imprint into the video game market. But Nintendo's always had that; they're never going to go away. They're always a giant. From what I've seen, backwards compatibility is amazing. It doesn't force players to have to buy copies of games they've already had just so they can play it on the new console. I'm intrigued to see if your online profiles will transfer over, because they did say that digital downloads are backwards compatible as well. So I'm kind of curious of what that means in terms of like your save files and stuff that's attached to your profiles.
Okay.
Um, and then really a lot of people are just holding their breath to see what are going to be the debut titles. We know Mario Kart 9 is going to happen.
Oh
And
yeah.
some of the stuff that we saw Mario Kart 9 is going to be kind of cool. We're 24 racers on a track. I've seen rumors that in Mario Kart they're going to be introducing a pit system in terms of like pitting in the middle of a race for tires and gas and stuff like that. So that'll be kind of cool.
Yeah, I saw that
Um,
too. A lot of the teasers for Mario Kart, because you saw them play Mario Kart in the trailer, so we know that's coming.
yeah, we just don't know what we saw with the 24 carts on the track is actual gameplay or just they wanted to show off the Switch 2. I know a lot of people are waiting for Pokemon ZA, and the obvious question that came out is this going to be on the Switch 2? Is it going to be on the Switch? Is it going to be on both? Is it going to be one of those debut titles? What's going to happen? And Pokemon Day is in a month's time, so we'll probably get a lot of those answers then. But I think the Switch 2 is great. I think it's going to be fun. I don't know if I'm going to get it right away. It really, the question of that backwards compatibility is going to matter to me more than anything else, because I have two Switches in my household. My wife and I both play on our Switches, sometimes at the same time, playing different games, all that stuff. So I don't know if I will need to go to the Switch 2, but I will eventually if I want to continue to play Pokemon. I know for sure that's going to be a minimum. So
Yeah,
I'm intrigued. I'm excited. I just can't wait for Pokemon Day, and then also the next Nintendo Direct, which will happen on April 2nd, to give us more information.
I love how they were intentional with April 2nd and not April 1st. So
Well, I'm not sure if you saw this, but the Switch 2 release was 2 minutes and 22 seconds.
okay,
They just wanted everything to be in twos.
yeah,
So,
I
but
can see
Nintendo
that.
is very good at that. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, that was gonna be a question I was gonna ask you. Is like, with this, what do you think about the new Pokemon game, which is Pokemon Legends Zeta A? But yeah, will probably figure out more on Pokemon Day. Like you said, it's in a month, so Pokemon, our listeners, just be prepared for that. We may get a big announcement, but we never know. They never tease what they're going to talk about for Pokemon on the Pokemon side, at least. But I'm excited. Even with my wife and her friends who do not play video games at all, this was something that they were talking about. So they're even excited. One of my wife's best friends was texting us, is like, "Oh, like I can't wait to get the Switch too. I can't wait. Like it looks so good." And she literally just bought a Switch. So it's everyone's talking about this. Everyone's excited. I know for those interested in Pokemon, we should be excited because this is how we play our games. One thing I actually saw as a rumored release is a new Pokemon Coliseum game.
I did see that, but I'm taking everything like that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, because
I don't see a spin. I don't see a a spin-off or a remake of a spin-off happening while we have no details for ZA.
yeah, I thought it was cool because like Pokemon, I never played Pokemon Coliseum, so it'll be nice for me to play that because I never, well, we never really had the GameCube. If we did, I don't even remember playing it.
Yeah, we had a GameCube. We just didn't. We just that was when I think you and I are transitioning, like in the middle school and high school, so we didn't play as much video games then.
Yeah, that's true. But I saw that, and I saw Super Smash Brothers Legacy, so a lot of potential big names for the release of Switch 2. So we'll see. But yeah, I just want to get your thoughts on that before we transition to the next segment. But let's do that. So this week's Rogue Deck of the Week is something that I was working on all week. This was my reaction to the statements that we made. This card has been around for actually quite some time, and I actually played this a little bit when it was first released, and I never really got it optimized, so I put it away, put it back in my bulk box. And when I was trying to figure out like, okay, what deck do I want to play for this week's challenge, this was actually very high contender for me. I built it, and I was actually having a lot of fun with it. So we are going to talk about everyone's favorite pig, Oinkologne. So we'll have the deck list in the show notes. But this deck is centered around Oinkologne EX. It is a Stage 1 colorless EX with HP of 260. And it has 2 attacks. The first one for a single colorless is called Maddening Scent. It does 10 damage plus it does 30 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. And then the next attack is Heavy Stomp for 3 colorless energy. And it does 210, and then you flip a coin if tails. During your next turn, the Pokemon can attack. So the attacks aren't the best, but what I like about this is that it's colorless, and colorless has a lot of really cool support behind it. And the way I built this list was really of a tank and run type of aspect. So I paired it with Cheren's Care. So that is a support. I haven't really seen it a lot, but it says put one of your colorless Pokemon that has any damage counters on it and attached cards into your hand. So 260 is very hard to hit into. And you pair that with the Rigid Band, which takes 30 less damage on Stage 1 Pokemon. So the goal is to chain a way to heal. And it was pretty fun. So you'll put your Oinkologne, it will take a hit. Play Cheren's Care, put up another Oinkologne, hit into it, and you kind of want to just prevent your opponent from taking any prize cards.
Yeah, I mean, I played a match or two with it. I haven't tested as much as you have this week, and it was fun. It's very reminiscent to like the decks in the meta when you used to Acerola chain.
Mm-hmm.
And just be like, all right, unless you take a one shot, I'm just going to reset. And I'm going to keep on putting pressure on you. And I'm going to force you to try to figure out how to get around.
Yeah, and the way I would describe this is when you play this deck, even though it's very EX multi-prize centric, you kind of have to treat it like a single prize deck a little bit. Because you know you're not one-shotting anything. The attacks don't do that much damage. But it's also very low maintenance once you get your basic Pokemon set up. And you just have to get your Bibarels and your Oinkolones out, as soon as you get that, you're just attaching a single energy every single turn, and you're just two-shotting, two-shotting, two-shotting. And because it's a colorless Pokemon, you can take advantage of using different special energy. So the special energies I use in this list is Double Turbo Energy, Gift Energy, Jet Energy, and the V-Guard Energy. And the reason why I picked V-Guard is because you still see Regidrago, you still see Lugia, you'll still see Palkia. Like, all those are V Pokemon, so you can take even less damage from them as well.
Yeah, I think when I saw the V guard, I'm like, that makes sense. Like, it made perfect sense to me. It wasn't even like something that you had to convince me into. I would say the one thing, like I asked you when we were building, like going through the deck list, I go, I don't understand the double turbo. And then you told me why. I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's for the heavy stomp. You don't want to hit into it, but with hitting with Manning Scent, you kind of just set up a heavy stomp reaction. So then you can take your prize cards, and then, okay, if you flip tails, the goal is to get it out of play with Cheren's care anyway. So the tail flip didn't really matter, but you are focusing really on the first attack.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's one energy and go kind of deal.
Yeah, so it was pretty fun. I remember in one of my play testing before I recorded the showcase, I went against a Charizard, and I want to say I either took 2 or 3. So they're hitting 270 into me, which typically would knock me out. But the ace spec of choice in this list is Hero's Cape. So I had a Hero's Cape on the Oinkologne, so I had 360 HP. They're hitting 270. I'm like, okay, Cheren's Care. Bring up a new Oinkologne, and I attack into it, and then they hit me again. I'm like, okay, Cheren's Care again. And I repeated it 4 times. Granted, I didn't win the match, but the fact that I was able to chain Cheren's Care that many times with the same tool, same energy, same stage 1 Pokemon, it was just hilarious.
Yeah, I bet it would be one of those moments like your opponent would be like, just die already.
And it was a pretty fun deck. I remember when I first built this, it had a similar concept. We just got some new additions from when the Oinkologne first was released. We have the Bloodmoon Ursaluna and a Radiant Charizard to go with it. So we'll have the deck list in the show notes, and we will also have the showcase video releasing on Friday, the day after this podcast episode is published. So take a watch with it, subscribe, let us know your thoughts on it. Disclaimer, I know this is not a good deck, but it is a fun deck, and that is the point of this. We want to show proof concept that certain things can work, and even if you don't win, as long as you have a close game, a good game, that should be what matters. Yes, we want to win, but we also want to have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I think, like when we showcase some of the matches that are not wins, it shows that there is ebbs and flows, there is good moments to matches, and as long as the deck has potential, you could always run hot on a day and have a lot more fun.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is a contender for me for the challenge I'm playing in this week. We'll see if I decide to go with it. I'll probably be picking last minute again, like I did with the last challenge I went to. I literally had 3 deck lists with me, and I'm like, I made up my mind as I parked my car. So I'm in the same boat right now. The people in my Discord, they know, or not my Discord, in my shop Discord, they know the journey I have been going through because I've been keeping them up to date. I thought this was a fun challenge to give to myself, and I've really enjoyed it. We've had a lot of good collaboration, a lot of good conversations about some interesting decks, and this is one of the decks that we did talk about. So yeah, if you have an interesting deck yourself, a nice homebrew deck, something we won't see on Limitless or Play Limitless, send us an email. We want to see these decks. We'll give you credit if we do decide to make it our rogue deck of the week. So we're not shy about giving credit where it is due. And we just want to hear what your all's thoughts are on the card pull. I know Devin would appreciate it as he is again reintroduced to this game since he's been out for so long. And
Yeah, there's so many matches where I'm reading every single card. I still don't know. It's like maybe a third of the cards right now.
yeah, and I know there's a couple decks that Yumi we're talking about with Journey Together that we're working on. So once that set releases, we have a couple of ideas already in on the back burner that we just have to optimize. But yeah, I think that's it for this week's episode. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think we're good for now.
So a little shorter of an episode compared to what we have been doing. But hasn't been a lot change. We'll see once Prismatic Evolution comes. I know we all been playtesting on live and seeing some of the decks pop up from it, and I'm excited for next week when we will introduce our little what are we going to call this? Our little series of road decks. I know we're talking about it. We have a concept already put together. So we're going to practice, playtest, refine the first list, and I'm excited to see what y'all think about it as well.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I think with this new mini set coming in, yes, it's a lot of reprints as we talked about in the past, but I think it also gives new Pokemon time in the spotlight. And it's just going to breed a whole new level of creativity as we wait till the big one in March.
Yeah, everyone's excited about it. We were talking about the set at League last week. So, yeah. With that being said, thank you for listening. Like, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do post the episode on YouTube, and we have our showcase on there. Leave us a comment on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, however you listen to it. Let us know your opinions. We do read the comments. We have actually got a couple comments on YouTube last couple days, so we have responded to them. So yeah, until then, have fun playing those sneaky decks.
Have a great day, guys. Bye.